The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, bathing the Thompson farm in a soft, golden glow. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh earth and dew-kissed grass. A rooster crowed from the chicken coop, signaling the start of another day. 12-year-old Emma Thompson stirred beneath her quilt, the warmth of sleep still clinging to her. But there was no time to linger in bed. The farm demanded her attention. She tossed off the quilt and quickly dressed in her worn butt. Emma hurried downstairs, where the scent of freshly baked bread filled the small kitchen. Her mother, Mrs. Thompson, was already up, bustling around the stove. "Good morning, Emma," her mother said with a tired but warm smile. Her eyes, though kind, bore the weariness of years of hard work and struggle. "Morning, Mama," Emma replied, grabbing a slice of bread and stuffing it into her mouth. "I'm going to feed the chickens and milk Bessie. Don't forget to check the vegetable garden," Mrs. Thompson reminded her. "The beans were looking a little wilted yesterday. And if you have time, can you fetch some water from the well?" Emma nodded, swallowing the last of her bread. She grabbed a pail and headed out the door, into the cool morning air. The farm had been in their family for generations, though it had seen better days. The barn, once a proud red, was now faded and peeling. The fields, which had once stretched far and wide, were now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. The crops struggled in the poor soil, and the animals were fewer each year. Emma's father had passed away when she was just 8 years old, leaving her and her mother to manage the farm on their own. It was a hard life, but Emma loved the farm. It was her home, and she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. She made her way to the chicken coop, where a dozen or so hens clucked and pecked at the ground. She scattered some feed for them and collected the eggs, placing them carefully in a basket. The hens were some of the few animals they had left. They had sold most of their livestock to keep the farm running. Next, she went to the barn, where Bessie, their old dairy cow, waited patiently. Bessie was one of the last remnants of the once thriving farm, and Emma had a special bond with her. She stroked the cow's flank before sitting down to milk her, the rhythmic sound of milk hitting the pail breaking the morning silence. After finishing with Bessie, Emma made her way to the vegetable garden. The beans were indeed wilted, their leaves curling in on themselves. She knelt down and touched the soil. It was dry and cracked. They hadn't had rain in over a week, and the well water wasn't enough to keep the plants healthy. She sighed and stood up, glancing around the farm. Everything seemed to be falling apart. The crops were struggling, the animals were aging, and even the farmhouse had seen better days. But despite it all, Emma was determined to keep the farm going. She had to for her mother, for her father's memory, and for herself. Emma's days were a blur of chores and responsibilities. From dawn until dusk, she worked tirelessly, helping her mother with the never-ending tasks that kept the farm running. She fed the animals, tended the garden, hauled water from the well, and helped with the cooking and cleaning. There was little time for anything else. But despite the hard work, Emma never complained. She knew how much her mother depended on her. Since her father's death, the farm had been their only source of income, and they couldn't afford to let it fail. Emma was determined to do whatever it took to keep it going. One afternoon, after finishing her chores, Emma decided to visit old Mr. Jenkins. He was their neighbor, an elderly farmer who lived alone on the next farm over. He had known her father well and had always been kind to Emma and her mother. Mr. Jenkins was sitting on his porch when Emma arrived, his weathered face breaking into a smile as he saw her approach. "Well, if it isn't young Emma Thompson," he said, his voice raspy but warm. "What brings you here today, lass?" I just finished my chores and thought I'd come to see you, Emma replied, taking a seat beside him. Mama says I should rest, but I don't like sitting still for too long. Mr. Jenkins chuckled. You're just like your father, always busy with something. How's the farm holding up? Emma hesitated, then sighed. It's hard, Mr. Jenkins. The crops aren't doing well, and we don't have enough money to buy new seeds or fix the barn. I don't know how much longer we can keep going. Mr. Jenkins nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. Farming's never been easy. Emma looked down at her hands, calloused from years of hard work. I just wish I knew what to do. I read all the books I can find about farming and plants, but it feels like it's never enough. That's the right attitude, Emma, Mr. Jenkins said. Keep learning, keep experimenting. Farming's as much about the mind as it is about the hands. You never know when you'll stumble on something that makes all the difference. His words stayed with Emma as she walked back to the farm. She had always admired her father's knowledge and skill as a farmer, and she wanted to live up to his legacy. But it was hard not to feel overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility that rested on her young shoulders. That night, after dinner, Emma climbed up to the attic. It was a dusty, dimly lit space, filled with old furniture, trunks, and boxes that hadn't been touched in years. She loved exploring the attic, sifting through the remnants of her family's past. It was like stepping into another world, a world where her father was still alive and the farm was thriving. She pulled out an old chest that had belonged to her father and opened it. Inside were papers, notebooks, and a few books, all related to farming. Emma carefully lifted out a leather-bound journal, the pages yellowed with age. It was her father's journal, filled with notes, sketches, and observations from his years as a farmer and an agricultural scientist. As she flipped through the pages, something fell out, a small, worn envelope. Curious, Emma picked it up and opened it. Inside were several seeds, small and dark, unlike any she had seen before. There was also a note in her father's handwriting. These seeds are the result of years of experimentation. They are designed to thrive in poor soil and harsh conditions. If successful, they could change the future of our farm. Plant them with care. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could these seeds be the answer to their problems? Could they save the farm? She carefully folded the note and placed it back in the envelope, her mind racing with possibilities. She didn't know if the seeds would work, but she had to try. It was a chance, a small glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped their lives. The next morning, Emma was up before the sun. She could hardly contain her excitement as she gathered her tools and made her way to the small, neglected corner of the farm where she planned to plant the seeds. The plot was overgrown with weeds, the soil dry and cracked. It was a patch of land that had been ignored for years, considered too poor to grow anything worthwhile. But Emma saw it as a challenge, a chance to test her father's seeds and her own abilities. She started by clearing the weeds, pulling them up by the roots and tossing them into a pile. The work was hard, but Emma didn't mind. She imagined her father working beside her, guiding her hands, encouraging her to keep going. Once the plot was cleared, Emma began preparing the soil. She dug deep, turning the earth over with her shovel, loosening it so the roots of the plants could penetrate easily. She remembered her father's teachings about soil health and fertility, how important it was to add organic matter to improve the soil's structure and nutrient content. She fetched a wheelbarrow full of compost from the pile behind the barn. It was rich and dark, full of life-giving nutrients. Emma spread it evenly over the plot, mixing it into the soil with her shovel. As she worked, she thought about all the things she had read in her father's books about soil health. He had always emphasized the importance of organic matter, saying that it was the key to transforming pour soil into something that could support life. After several hours of hard work, the plot was ready. The soil was soft and crumbly, rich with compost. Emma felt a sense of satisfaction as she surveyed her work, wiping the sweat from her brow. She could almost hear her father's voice in her ear, praising her for her efforts. Now came the most important part, planting the seeds. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the small envelope she had found in the attic. She opened it carefully, revealing the precious seeds inside. There were only a few, and she knew she had to plant them with care. Emma knelt down and began to plant the seeds. With the seeds planted, Emma stood up and brushed the dirt off her hands. She felt a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. It was a small hope, fragile and delicate, but it was enough to give her the strength to keep going. As the days passed, Emma tended to the plot with care and dedication. She watered the soil regularly, making sure it stayed moist but not too wet. She kept a close eye on the weather, adjusting her watering schedule based on the temperature and humidity. She even set up a makeshift scarecrow to keep the birds away from the newly planted seeds. Each day, she would visit the plot, kneeling down to check for any signs of growth. At first, there was nothing, just the bare, brown earth staring back at her. But Emma didn't lose hope. She knew that plants needed time to grow, and she was willing to wait as long as it took. One morning, about a week after planting the seeds, Emma noticed something different. As she approached the plot, she saw tiny green shoots pushing their way up through the soil. Her heart leapt with excitement as she knelt down for a closer look. The seeds had sprouted. They were growing. Emma couldn't contain her joy. She rushed back to the farmhouse to tell her mother the good news. "Mama, Mama!" Emma called as she burst through the door. "The seeds, they've sprouted." Mrs. Thompson looked up from her sewing, her face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and hope. "They have." "Oh, Emma, that's wonderful news." Together, they hurried out to the plot, where Mrs. Thompson knelt down beside her daughter to examine the tiny green shoots. "They look so healthy," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Your father would be so proud of you, Emma." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat at her mother's words. She missed her father every day, but knowing that she was carrying on his work made her feel closer to him. Over the next few weeks, the plants continued to grow at an astonishing rate. They were strong and healthy, their leaves a vibrant green. Emma tended to them with care, making sure they had everything they needed to thrive. She kept detailed notes in a journal, just like her father had done, recording the plant's growth and any observations she made. It wasn't long before the plants began to bear fruit. The vegetables were unlike anything Emma had ever seen, large, colorful, and bursting with flavor. She could hardly believe her eyes as she harvested the first crop, filling basket after basket with the bounty. Emma and her mother brought the vegetables to the local market, where they quickly became the talk of the town. The other farmers were amazed by the size and quality of the produce, and soon everyone wanted to buy from the Thompson farm. For the first time in years, the farm was making a profit. Emma and her mother were able to pay off their debts, buy new supplies, and even make some much-needed repairs to the farmhouse and barn. The farm was thriving, and it was all thanks to the seeds Emma had found in the attic. But Emma didn't stop there. She knew that the success of the farm wasn't just about the seeds, it was about the knowledge and care that had gone into growing them. She continued to experiment with different farming techniques, always looking for ways to improve the soil, conserve water, and increase the yield. She also started sharing what she had learned with others in the community. She held workshops on sustainable farming practices, teaching her neighbors how to improve their soil, conserve water, and grow healthier crops. The other farmers were eager to learn from her, and soon the whole community was benefiting from Emma's knowledge. As the months passed, the Thompson farm became a model of sustainable farming. Emma's crops were the envy of the region, and farmers from neighboring towns began visiting to learn her techniques. Emma's reputation as a knowledgeable and innovative farmer grew, and she was often invited to speak at agricultural meetings. The success of the farm brought new opportunities for Emma and her mother. They were able to invest in more land, expanding their fields and increasing their crop diversity. Emma experimented with new varieties of fruits and vegetables, crossbreeding them with the special seeds she had found in the attic to create plants that were even more resilient and productive. She also invested in sustainable farming practices, implementing crop rotation, cover cropping, and composting on a larger scale. These practices helped improve the soil's health, ensuring that it remained fertile and productive for years to come. Emma was passionate about preserving the land for future generations, and she made sure that every decision she made was in line with that goal. The farm's success also meant that Emma was able to attend school more regularly. She had always been a bright and eager student, but her responsibilities on the farm had often kept her from attending classes. Now, with the farm on stable ground, she had more time to devote to her studies. Emma excelled in her classes, particularly in science and agriculture. She loved learning about the principles behind the farming, techniques she had been using and discovering new ways to improve her work on the farm. Her teachers were impressed with her knowledge and enthusiasm, and they encouraged her to pursue further education in the field. Despite her busy schedule, Emma always made time for the farm. She continued to work alongside her mother, tending to the crops and caring for the animals. She knew that the farm was the foundation of everything she had achieved, and she never wanted to lose that connection to the land. One day, as Emma was working in the fields, she noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was old Mr. Jenkins, his face creased with a warm smile. "Afternoon, Emma," he called out as he reached the edge of the field. "I see your crops are doing mighty fine." Emma wiped the sweat from her brow and smiled back at him. "They're doing well, Mr. Jenkins, thanks to everything you've taught me." Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "You've done all the work, lass. I'm just an old man with a few stories to tell." Emma walked over to him, leaning on her hoe. "I've learned so much from you, Mr. Jenkins. I don't think the farm would be where it is today without your advice." "Nonsense," Mr. Jenkins replied, though he looked pleased. "You've got the heart of a farmer, Emma. It's in your blood. Your father would be proud." Word of Emma's success with Jacob's farm spread quickly, and soon more farmers were asking for her help. Emma found herself busier than ever, but she didn't mind. She was thrilled to see her community thriving and to know that she was making a real difference in people's lives. Emma's mother, Mrs. Thompson, watched with pride as her daughter became a leader in their community. The farm, once on the brink of collapse, was now a beacon of hope and resilience. The farmhouse, too, had undergone a transformation. With the money they had earned from their successful crops, Emma and her mother had been able to repair the roof, paint the walls, and even add a new room where Emma could study and plan her projects. But Emma wasn't content to rest on her laurels. She knew that the key to long-term success was continuous learning and innovation. She spent her evenings reading agricultural journals, studying the latest research on sustainable farming practices, and experimenting with new techniques on her own land. One day, as Emma was flipping through a book on crop diversity, she came across an idea that piqued her interest: intercropping. The book explained how planting different types of crops together could improve yields, reduce pests, and make more efficient use of resources like water and nutrients. Excited by the possibilities, Emma decided to try intercropping on a small section of her farm. She planted rows of beans and corn together, spacing them in such a way that the beans could use the corn stalks for support, while the corn benefited from the nitrogen-fixing properties of the beans. The experiment was a success. The crops grew vigorously, and the combination of plants helped to suppress weeds and deter pests. Emma was thrilled with the results and began incorporating intercropping into more areas of the farm. She also shared her findings with the community. During one of their regular gatherings, the other farmers were eager to try intercropping on their own land, and soon the practice became widespread in the region. As the years passed, The Thompson farm became a symbol of what could be achieved through hard work, knowledge, and a commitment to sustainability. Emma's reputation as a skilled and innovative farmer continued to grow, and she was often invited to speak at agricultural conferences and workshops across the country. Despite her success, Emma remained humble and deeply connected to her roots. She never forgot the struggles her family. One crisp autumn day, Emma received a letter that would change the course of her life. It was an invitation from a prestigious agricultural university, offering her a full scholarship to study advanced farming techniques and sustainable agriculture. Emma was stunned. She had always dreamed of furthering her education, but she had never imagined that such an opportunity would come her way. The university's program was renowned for its cutting-edge research and its commitment to sustainable farming practices, everything that Emma was passionate about. When she showed the letter to her mother, Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears of pride. "Oh, Emma, this is everything your father would have wanted for you. You've worked so hard for this. You deserve it." Emma felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She knew that attending the university would mean leaving the farm and her mother behind, at least for a while. But she also knew that the knowledge she would gain could help her continue to improve the farm and make an even greater impact on the community. "Mama, what about the farm? I can't just leave you here alone to manage everything," Emma said, her voice filled with concern. Mrs. Thompson smiled gently. "Emma, you've built something wonderful here. The farm is thriving, and the community is strong. I can manage things while you're away, and you'll be back before you know it, armed with even more knowledge to help us grow." Emma nodded, though the thought of leaving home was still difficult. But she knew her mother was right. This was an opportunity she couldn't pass up, not just for herself, but for the future of the farm and the community. With a heart full of both anticipation and sadness, Emma wrote back to the university, accepting their offer. The weeks leading up to her departure were a whirlwind of activity, as she prepared for the journey and made sure the farm was in good hands. The day finally came when Emma had to say goodbye. Her mother accompanied her to the train station, the two of them standing side by side as they watched the train pull into the station. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice choked with emotion. "Your father would be too." Emma hugged her mother tightly, tears filling her eyes. "I'll make you proud, Mama, I promise." With one last wave, Emma boarded the train, her heart heavy with the weight of leaving home, but also light with the excitement of the journey ahead. As the train pulled away from the station, she looked out the window, watching the familiar landscape of her childhood recede into the distance. The university was everything Emma had hoped for and more. She immersed herself in her studies, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. She learned about advanced techniques for soil management, crop diversification, pest control, and water conservation. She studied the latest research on climate change and its impact on agriculture, and she learned how to develop strategies to help farmers adapt to changing conditions. Emma also met students and professors from all over the world, each with their own experiences and insights to share. She formed lasting friendships and found herself inspired by the diversity of ideas and approaches she encountered. But no matter how far she traveled or how much she learned, Emma's thoughts always returned to her farm and her community. She kept in regular contact with her mother, who updated her on the farm's progress. She was thrilled to hear that the farm continued to thrive under her mother's care, and she was eager to return home and apply everything she had learned. After 4 years of study, Emma graduated at the top of her class. She was offered numerous opportunities to work with agricultural organizations and research institutions around the world. But she knew where her heart lay. She wanted to return to her farm, to the land that had shaped her, and to the community that had supported her. When she arrived back at the farm, it was a warm spring day. The fields were lush and green, the trees heavy with blossoms, and the farmhouse looked as sturdy and welcoming as ever. Emma's mother was waiting for her at the gate, her face beaming with pride. "Welcome home, Emma," Mrs. Thompson said, embracing her daughter tightly. "It's good to be home, Mama," Emma replied, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The next few months were some of the happiest of Emma's life. She threw herself into the work at the farm, applying everything she had learned at the university. She introduced new crops, experimented with innovative irrigation techniques, and set up a small research station where she could continue her studies and share her findings with the community. Emma also resumed her role as a leader in the community, organizing workshops and meetings where farmers could learn from one another and share their experiences. She worked with local schools to teach children about sustainable farming and the importance of caring for the land. The farm became a hub of activity and innovation, drawing visitors from far and wide who wanted to learn from Emma's expertise. But despite the farm's growing reputation, Emma never lost sight of what was most important to her: the land, her family, and her community. As the years went by, the Thompson farm became a model of sustainable agriculture, a shining example of what could be achieved with hard work, knowledge, and a commitment to the land. Emma's contributions to the field of agriculture were recognized on a national level, and she was often called upon to advise on farming policies and practices. Despite her growing influence, Emma remained deeply connected to her roots. She spent her days working the fields, her hands in the soil, just as she had always done. The farm was her home, and the land was her teacher. Every day brought new challenges and new lessons, and Emma embraced them all with the same passion and determination that had driven her since she was a child. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields, Emma and her mother sat on the porch of the farmhouse, sipping cool lemonade. The air was filled with the sound of crickets chirping and the scent of blooming flowers. It was a moment of peace and contentment, a time to reflect on how far they had come. "You've done so much, Emma," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with pride. "Your father would be so proud of you. I'm proud of you." Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that words couldn't fully capture. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. Mama, you've been my strength, my guide. This farm, this life we built, it's ours together." Mrs. Thompson reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You've taken what your father started and turned it into something truly extraordinary. But more than that, you've brought our community together. You've shown everyone that with the right knowledge and a lot of heart, anything is possible." Emma looked out over the fields, the rows of crops standing tall and strong in the fading light. "It's the land that taught me, Mama, the land and the people who care for it. There's a wisdom in the earth, in the cycles of nature, that's more powerful than anything we could ever learn in books. I'm just glad I could listen to it and help others listen too." As the years passed, Emma continued to innovate and expand her work. She established a community cooperative where local farmers could pool their resources and sell their produce directly to consumers, ensuring fair prices and a sustainable income for everyone involved. The cooperative became a model for other communities, helping small farmers stay competitive in an increasingly challenging market. Emma also worked with local schools to develop educational programs in agriculture and environmental stewardship. She believed that the next generation needed to understand the importance of caring for the land and producing food in a sustainable way. She often invited students to the farm, where they could learn hands-on about planting, harvesting, and the delicate balance of ecosystems. In recognition of her contributions, Emma was awarded numerous honors, including a prestigious national award for sustainable farming. Yet, despite all the accolades, she remained humble, always crediting the land, her family, and her community for her success. One day, as Emma was walking through the fields, she noticed a young girl standing at the edge of the farm, watching intently as Emma worked. The girl looked to be about the same age Emma had been when she first started helping her father on the farm. Emma smiled and waved the girl over. "Hello there," she said warmly. "Would you like to see what we're doing here?" The girl nodded shyly and stepped forward. "I've heard so much about your farm. Miss Emma, my parents say it's the best farm around. I want to learn how to grow things like you do." Emma's heart swelled with joy. "Well, you're in the right place. There's always something to learn on a farm, and I'd be happy to show you. What's your name?" "Clara," the girl replied, her eyes shining with excitement. "Well, Clara," Emma said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the girl, "how about we start with something simple? Let's go plant some seeds together. They might be small." But as Emma and Clara walked hand in hand toward the garden, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come full circle from the young girl who had once struggled to save her family's farm to the woman who now inspired others to follow in her footsteps. The farm had become more than just a source of livelihood. It was a living legacy, a testament to the power of resilience, community, and the enduring connection between people and the land. "Clara," the girl replied, her eyes shining with excitement. "Well, Clara," Emma said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the girl, "how about we start with something simple? Let's go plant some seeds together. They might be small, but with a little care, they'll grow into something amazing." As Emma and Clara walked hand in hand toward the garden, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come full circle from the young girl who had once struggled to save her family's farm to the woman who now inspired others to follow in her footsteps. The farm had become more than just a source of livelihood. It was a living legacy, a testament to the power of resilience, community, and the enduring connection between people and the land. Years passed, and Emma continued her work on the farm and in the community, always finding new ways to nurture the land and support those around her. The farm became a place of learning and inspiration for people from all walks of life, a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed uncertain. One day, Emma found herself in the attic of the old farmhouse, sorting through some boxes of her father's belongings. As she carefully opened an old, weathered chest, she discovered something that took her breath away: a small, handwritten note tucked inside a book of farming techniques. The note was from her father, written in his neat, careful script. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means you found your way back to the farm. I always knew you would. This land is special, and it's a part of you, just as it was a part of me and your grandfather before me. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. Remember, the seeds you plant today will grow into the future you build tomorrow. I'm proud of you, my dear. I always will be." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she held the note close. Her father's words resonated deep within her, affirming everything she had always known to be true. She had spent her life nurturing the land, but in return, the land had nurtured her, guiding her toward a future filled with purpose and meaning. As she looked out the attic window, watching the sunset over the fields, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. The farm would continue to thrive, as it always had, under her care and the care of those who would come after her. The seeds of the future were planted, and they would grow, just as her father had said. And so, Emma Thompson, the girl who had once saved her family's farm, became a steward of the land and a guardian of the future, ensuring that the lessons of the past would continue to guide generations to come. The end.